This is the bicycle frame video part 6. In the previous parts, we completed the bike frame master file, which has a total of 9 solid bodies. These bodies represent the front triangle of the frame and 1/2 of the rear triangle, including 1/2 of the brake bridge. Many details are intentionally missing from this master file. For example, there will later on be threaded holes in these 2 mounting bosses. We have no fillets on these sharp edges of the dropout plate. And most importantly, none of the tubes have been trimmed in order to fit tightly against each other. The trims that remove the excess portions of the tubes are known as miter cuts, and the process of creating the miter cuts is known as mitering. For this video, we will be creating separate files for each tube using the master file. To create each tube file, we will be inserting the master file into that tube file and then deleting all of the bodies that we don't need. For example, if we were going to make a separate file for the top tube, we would insert the entire master file into a new file that we call top tube, and then we will delete all the bodies that are not the top tube, leaving just the top tube. It is these individual part files where we will do the mitering and add any embellishments such as fillets or threaded holes. After all these separate files are created, we can then create the left side of the rear triangle by making mirror image parts of the chainstay, seat stay, and dropout plate. One method for placing bodies into their own separate files is to right-click on a body in the Bodies folder and say Insert into New Part. What this will do is open up a new part with that particular body inserted into it, and that file can be saved with a new name. This method has some known bugs where the inserted part can lose its reference back to the master file if a lot of manipulations are done later on in the feature tree, especially if the feature tree is rolled forward and back and different combine and split features are used or added later on. Once that inserted part loses its reference to the master file, there's no easy way to reestablish that reference, and any additional features that were added in that inserted part file have to be done all over again. The method we are going to use is slightly more laborious but more reliable. So for this video, I'm going to create a new part file for each of these bodies in the Bodies folder, and I'll do it in the same order that you see here. So let's start. We'll go up to File, New, Part, opens up a new window for us. Now we will say Insert Part, and we will browse to our frame master file, open, and we want to make sure that Solid Bodies is checked, that nothing else is checked, and Locate Part is unchecked. Then we just click on the green check mark, which gives us the entire frame master file inserted into our new part. For this part, we are actually going to be making the bottom bracket shell, so we need to delete everything that is not a bottom bracket shell. Opening up the Bodies folder, we see all the bodies in the inserted file, first one being the bottom bracket shell. And what we could do is delete each of these bodies one at a time, or the easy way to do this is simply click on the top body in the list, then hold down the Shift key, go down to the bottom body. That will highlight all of them. Now you can right-click and go to Delete Bodies. This inserts into this box all the bodies that we chose. We want to save the bottom bracket shell. We can delete it out of the list here, or what can be easier is just going into the graphic window and reselecting the body that we actually do not want deleted. So that unselects it from the box here, and we see that it's disappeared. Now we just click on the green check mark, leaving us with only the bottom bracket shell. So even though we had 8 bodies to delete, we were able to do that in just a few seconds. Now for this part, normally we would add some threads here and here for the bottom bracket itself to screw in, but since we aren't going to be seeing any of those features when we assemble the bike, we will just leave them out. The only thing we are going to add to this part is just some fillets to get rid of these sharp edges. So we'll go to fillet, and I'll choose just 0.5 millimeter for my fillet. So we just want to round over that sharp edge. And that's all we have to do to create the bottom bracket shell. Now we can save that, save as, and we'll clear this out here and call this bottom bracket shell. And we've just saved our first individual bike frame tube part. Moving on to the next part, we again say File, New, and again we say Insert, Part, and again select our frame master. We have solid bodies checked, everything else unchecked. Okay, let's open up our solid bodies folder. This time we want to make the head tube. So again, clicking on the first in the list, clicking on the last in the list, go to Delete Bodies. I want to select the head tube so that it takes it out of the list here. Click the check mark, and there's my head tube. Again, I'd like to add some fillets to the sharp edges. So 0.5 millimeters. Add a fillet here, and a fillet down at the bottom. And I've just completed my head tube. So File, Save, Head tube. Moving on, File, New, Part. Again, Insert, Part, Master. And this time, I want to make the seat tube. You'll notice it's incorrectly called the seat post in this list. But we have a little problem. We don't want to delete all these frame members just yet because the seat tube intersects with the bottom bracket shell. We need to miter the end of the seat tube so that it fits against the bottom bracket shell tightly. To do that, we want to make a copy of the outer surface of the bottom bracket shell and use that to cut away the excess on the seat tube. So going to our surfaces, Offset Surface, click on the surface of the bottom bracket shell, and set this to 0. That's copied the outer face and made a 0 thickness surface that exactly matches that outer face. Now that we've done that, we can get rid of the tubes that we don't need. So in our solid bodies folder, clicking on first in the list, holding down Shift, clicking on the last, right click, delete bodies, and the bodies we want to save are just the seat tube, and that's it. That leaves us with the seat tube and that surface that we created earlier. We see that in our solid bodies folder we have just the seat tube, but we also have a surface bodies folder which includes this copy of the outer surface of the bottom bracket shell. Now we can miter the end of this tube by going to Insert, Cut, with Surface. We will select this surface, and this will act as a knife to cleanly remove the material we don't want. This arrow is facing inward, indicating that everything on the inside of this circle will be removed. That's the correct direction for us, so we'll click on the check mark. Now we see that excess has been removed. We'd like this file to be clean without any extraneous bodies, so we now want to get rid of the surface body. So going to our surface bodies folder, right click on that surface body, delete body, and we're done. So we have 2 delete bodies in our feature tree. The first was to get rid of solid bodies. The second is to get rid of our surface bodies. And just like our previous tubes, I don't want to have any sharp exposed edges. So I will just add a fillet to this edge here, make that 0.5 millimeters again. And that completes the seat tube. So just saving this, File, Save, Seat Tube, and now we move on. File, New, and again, Insert, Part, Bike Frame Master, green check mark, and the next body to separate out is going to be the top tube. Once again, we have an issue here where the top tube needs to be mitered, where it intersects with the seat tube and where it intersects with the head tube. So we need to make copies of this outer surface and this outer surface before we can delete the extraneous bodies. So going to our Surfaces tab, Offset Surface, set this to 0, click on the seat tube surface and the head tube surface, and finish. Here's our offset in the feature tree. And now again, we can click on the first body in the solid bodies folder, clicking on the first body in our bodies folder, holding shift, clicking on the last one, right click, delete bodies, and the one body we want to save is the top tube, check mark, and that leaves us with the top tube and our two surfaces we copied. Now we say Insert, Cut with Surface. We can only do these one at a time, so we'll check this surface first. We see that the arrow is facing inward, meaning that it will take away the inside of this cylinder. Finish. That's mitered this end of the top tube. Now we have to do this again. Insert, Cut with Surface, clicking on this surface this time. Again, it's already facing inward. Click the green check mark, and that is mitered both ends for us. Now all we want to do is clean up our excess bodies, so we go to the Surface Bodies folder. This time we'll click on the first body in the folder, holding our shift key, select the second one, right click, delete bodies, and we will delete both those bodies at one time. So now we can see what our tube looks like when it's been mitered. File, Save, Top Tube. So you can see that this is a pretty easy process, and in a matter of minutes we've already made 4 of our files. Moving on, New File, Part, Insert, Part, Master, and opening up our Solid Bodies folder, we're on to our 5th part here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we see that that is the down tube. The name is a little bit different because the bodies are named according to the last feature applied to the body, which was the bottle cage bosses. We notice that the down tube intersects quite a few different tubes. It intersects the bottom bracket shell, the seat tube, the head tube, and if you look closely here, you'll notice that there's a small intersection with the top tube. We have a choice whether to create a notch in the top tube for the down tube or to create a notch in the down tube for the top tube. I've decided that I'll place the notch in the down tube, leaving the top tube intact. So going to our Surfaces tab, Offset Surface, set this to 0, choose the seat tube, bottom bracket shell, head tube, then we need to zoom in here. The surfaces of the top tube that are being intersected by the down tube are this surface, this bottom fillet, and this surface on the other side. Now we can delete the solid bodies that we don't need. Clicking on the first in the list, holding shift, clicking the last, right click, delete bodies. We want to save the down tube, so I'll reselect that, which takes it out of the list here, leaving us with the down tube and several surfaces. Now I can trim these in pretty much any order I want, but I will leave this notch for last. So Insert, Cut with Surface, select the bottom bracket shell, The arrow is facing inward. That's good. That gets rid of this portion here. Insert, cut with surface, select the seat tube surface, and let's see which way that arrow is facing. It's facing to the inside of the cylinder. That should get rid of the little notch there for the seat tube. Going up to the head tube area, insert, cut with surface, select this surface. Again, it's defaulting inward. That gets rid of the excess here. And now we've just got the bottom of the top tube that we've copied, which looks sort of like a trough now. So insert, cut with surface. This is one surface body. You see the arrow is facing to the inside of the trough, which is what we want. That will get rid of this little nub right here. Click the green check mark. That gets rid of that excess material right there. Now we're left with just getting rid of the surface bodies that we no longer need. Clicking open the surface bodies folder, selecting the first in the list, holding my shift key, the last, right click, delete bodies. There is our cleaned up down tube with all the miters. If we zoom into this end, we see the miter for the head tube. This little notch is the miter for the top tube. Going down to the bottom, you see that this is the miter for the bottom bracket shell, and this notch is for the seat tube. We aren't quite done with this part. We have some threaded holes that need to be added to these bosses. In a real bike, these bosses would be separate parts pressed into the tube, but we've sort of taken the easy way out here and just merged these bodies with this body. These bosses are supposed to have M5 threads put into them. Pre-selecting either of these surfaces as the surface for the threaded hole to be drilled into, you go to Features, Hole Wizard, and we want to have a metric thread. We want to have this icon highlighted for a straight tap, for a threaded hole. We want to have the selection from this menu here set to M5 by 0.8. And the default that I currently have is 12.4 millimeters deep for the hole and 10 millimeters deep for the threaded portion. You might have to adjust these numbers if you have a different default come up. The other option that I want to select is this middle one here, which gives me a cosmetic thread. So it'll put some little dotted lines around the hole indicating that that's a threaded hole. Once I've got all of these options selected the way I want, I click my Positions tab, and now I can tell it where the holes actually go. This hole needs to be concentric to the outer surface of the boss, so it will automatically find the concentric for me if I get my cursor near the center. And then the second hole I'll drag over here. If I bring it close to the center of the circle, it'll find the center automatically. I'll hit my escape key to take me out of this mode. You can see that it gives me a preview of the holes that are being placed into these bosses. Just click on the green check mark. Now I have the two holes that are threaded into these bosses, and you'll notice the little dotted line going around the holes. This indicates that this is supposed to be a threaded hole. Now I can finish up this part just by getting rid of the sharp edges on the bosses. So I'll go to Fillet. This time I'll make a 1 millimeter fillet for this edge. So I'll click on this edge here and this edge here. And that completes the bosses and it completes this part. File, Save, Down Tube. Continuing on. File, New, Part, Insert, Part, Master. And let's take a look at our next item in the list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We are going to be working on the seat stay. The seat stay intersects with the seat tube, but it just butts up to the dropout plate, so there's no need to do any mitering down at this end. So starting with our surfaces, we do an offset surface of 0, select the seat tube, finish. Now we can delete the solid bodies we don't want. Delete bodies, deselect the seat tube, check mark, leaving us with the seat stay and the outer surface of the seat tube. So insert, cut with surface, select the surface, the arrow is facing toward the inside of the cylinder, check mark. Now we can delete the surface body, leaving us just with the seat stay. That's all we have to do for this part. File, save, seat stay. Now remember, this is the right side, so I'm going to put right in the description. And later on we can make a mirror image of this part, which we will call the seat stay left. Continuing on, File, New, Insert Part, and let's open our solid bodies folder and see we go down to the 7th part, and that is going to be the chain stay. The chain stay also just butts up against the rear dropout, but it intersects with the bottom bracket shell, so we need a surface of the bottom bracket shell for mitering. Going to the Surfaces tab, Offset Surface, 0, the outer surface of the bottom bracket shell. Now we can delete the bodies we don't need. Reselecting the chain stay. Now we can miter away this excess, insert, cut with surface. The arrow is facing the proper direction. And now we can delete the surface body. And that's all we have to do there. File, save, chain stay. Remember, this is the right-hand side, so we'll put right in the description. And we'll keep moving along. Opening our solid bodies folder, we are down to this body here, which says stay stubs and dropout plate combined. That was the last feature applied to the dropout plate. We see that there are no miters to be done to the dropout plate because it's just butting up against the chain stay and the seat stay. So all we have to do is get rid of all the other bodies. And reselect the dropout plate. That gets rid of everything we don't need. Now I would like to add some fillets now to this because we have all these sharp edges, and I'd like these to be more generous fillets to give this a finished look. I'll first add some 2mm fillets to all of these sharp edges here. I can do this in just about any order I want, but the last fillets I want to add will be some fillets on this edge here for the dropout slot, and those will be smaller fillets. So going to Fillet, set this to 2, and I can just click on this face here, and that will pick up all the edges of that face, and using tangent propagation we'll even find the additional edges that connect up. So click on that face, and this face, and if I click on the inside surface of the hole, it should even fillet those edges for me too. So now I have a more refined looking dropout plate, and I can add some fillets to this edge, but these will be much smaller fillets. just to take the sharp edge off, but I want enough surface area for the nut that would normally go here. So fillet again, but just make this 1/2 millimeter. Click on this edge. It will follow all the way around, filleting that entire edge for me. I think I'll do one last refinement and just get rid of the sharp edges here and here. And I notice one last area where some fillets can go, and that is where this stub blends in to the plate. So once again, going to fillet, I'll try to set this for 2 millimeters. Just click on this edge here. You see how that just follows all around automatically. So I'll click on this edge here, and that follows all around automatically. Now I have a nicely blended, refined looking part. File, save, drop out, plate, and again remember this is the right side, so we'll call this right, save. In reality, the dropout plate usually has some little posts projecting off of these nubs, and those posts fit very tightly into the chainstay tubing and the seat stay tubing, so that when the weld is done at this joint, that weld wicks down into the joint and down into where this little plug is, forming a very strong bond that also creates good alignment between the stays and the dropout plate. We didn't bother putting those little pins in our model. Moving on, I believe we have just one more body to place into its own part file. File, new, part, insert, part, our master file. Opening our solid bodies folder, we just did the dropout plate, so we do have only one last body to do, the brake bridge. The brake bridge only intersects with the seat stay. So going to our surfaces, offset surface, set that to 0. Click on the seat stay, check mark. Now we can get rid of the bodies we don't need. Clicking on the first in the list, holding the shift, clicking on the last, right click, delete bodies, and we want to save the brake bridge, so we will reselect the brake bridge, green check mark, and that leaves the brake bridge and the surface of the seat stay. Now insert, cut with surface, select this surface, make sure it's pointing in the right direction, so it's pointing to the inside of the seat stay, check mark, and now we can delete that surface that we don't need, leaving us with the brake bridge. But we only made 1/2 of the brake bridge, and the reason we did that was we only had one stay to miter away the end of the brake bridge. So now what we can do is mirror this to the other side using the front plane as the mirror plane. So front plane, mirror. We want to use the mirror bodies option. Select this body. Make sure merge solids is checked. And that completes our brake bridge that has miters on both ends. File, save, brake bridge. So what about the 3 parts that need left-hand versions? We have right-hand versions of the seat stay, chain stay, and dropout plate. Well, that's actually very easy now. Let's open up that right-hand version of the chain stay that we made. All we have to do to make a new part that's a mirror image of this that will also include all of these features that we placed into this part is to first click on the plane that we need to use as the mirror. In this case, we want to mirror this part about the front plane. We select that first, then go into Insert, Mirror Part. If we haven't pre-selected a plane, the mirror part option will be grayed out. We click on mirror part, and that puts us into an insert part mode. We want solid bodies to be checked and nothing else selected. Finish that with a green check mark. What this does is insert the chainstay into a brand new part, but it inserts a mirror image of it. We see that we have a reference going back to the original right-hand chainstay. So if I look at the top view of this, and we look at where the front plane is, we see here's the front plane, and we see that this chainstay is on this side of the front plane, whereas the original chainstay was on this side of the front plane. The miter that was done to the right-hand chainstay appears in this left-hand chainstay, so there's nothing we have to do to this file except save it. This one we will call chain stay left. Now we can do the same for the seat stay and the dropout plate. So opening up the seat stay, again we select the front plane because that will be our mirror plane. Insert mirror part, solid bodies, check mark. And here is our left-handed seat stay, which I can show you from the top view. Here is our front plane. File, save, seat, stay, left. And we only have one part left. That will be the dropout plate. So File, Open, Dropout plate right. And one more time, we select the front plane as our mirror plane, insert, mirror part. That brings us to the insert part mode, solid bodies, green check mark. And here we see dropout plate right has been inserted in a mirrored orientation. Again, looking at this at the top view, and where our front plane is located, we see that this is on the left side of the front plane and the original is on the right side. Now all we have to do is go to File, Save, Drop Out Plate, Left. Now we have a complete set of tubes, each in their own individual files, which we can reassemble into an assembly file such as this here. And by placing these individual parts into an assembly file, we now have the opportunity to create an exploded view of the entire bicycle frame. We can also place all these individual parts into a new part file that will be used to simulate the welding of the tubing, as you can see here. These parts have been inserted as bodies into a single part, and then fillets added at all the junctures in order to simulate the welds that will hold the frame together. And at this stage, we can also add some graphics to our frame, which will complete Project 8. These two processes will be shown in later videos. This concludes the bike frame video, Part 6.